Cassandra Reed, poised and calm in a simple black tee and jeans, entered the investment firm's main floor just as Richard Langford's voice cut through the room. "You're a fraud. Step aside now." The words landed like a challenge, sharp and public, immediately drawing the attention of every employee and client nearby. The room went still, a tense hush stretching across polished floors and glass partitions as whispered reactions spread like electricity. Analysts paused mid-keystroke, traders leaned forward in their chairs, and the air was thick with anticipation. Cassandra didn't respond verbally. She merely adjusted the strap of her laptop bag, her eyes scanning the room, noting every expression, every flicker of doubt, every question in the air. Richard, clearly enjoying the moment, gestured for a junior associate to call security, adding, "Make sure she doesn't touch anything until we verify." Cassandra's gaze shifted to the young analyst in the corner whose phone was subtly recording, and for a brief second, the analyst's uncertainty mirrored the tension of the floor. Who was this woman, and why did she command such stillness? Cassandra remembered moments like this from her early career, the first time she walked into a boardroom and faced skepticism that had nothing to do with her experience, only assumptions. She inhaled, her presence alone anchoring the space, and in that calm, measured silence, the employees realized something unusual. She wasn't panicking, she wasn't pleading, she wasn't trying to perform. She simply existed in the room with a quiet authority that seemed to pull the air toward her. Richard, growing impatient, slammed a document onto the nearest desk and demanded verification, his tone laced with condescension. Cassandra's fingers hovered over her tablet for a moment, activating internal verification protocols she had quietly prepared, ensuring every movement was precise and deliberate. Around her, employees shifted uncomfortably, some glancing at one another, questioning whether they were witnessing a routine check or something far more consequential. Clients observing from the glass-walled lounge leaned closer, sensing that the unfolding scene was not ordinary, and as Cassandra lifted her head, her eyes met Richard's directly, unflinching, unshaken, silently communicating that she was in control, that every accusation would soon be met with undeniable truth. The hum of whispered conversations rose as the verification systems came alive, the screen confirming authority, access, and legitimacy in real time, while Richard's confident posture began to falter under the weight of the evidence streaming before everyone's eyes. In that suspended moment, the room collectively understood that the quiet woman in plain attire held more power than any of them had anticipated, a revelation that hung in the air and set the stage for a confrontation that would soon escalate beyond mere accusation, leaving every witness, employees, clients, and observers alike, wondering just how far the authority of Cassandra Reed extended and what consequences her next move would unleash. Cassandra Reed remained seated at the investment desk, her hands folded over the sleek black tablet, eyes calmly observing the flurry of activity around her as employees whispered to one another, questioning the sudden tension. Richard Langford paced briefly before leaning toward the nearest associate, his voice low but sharp. "Make sure all access is restricted. Verify her credentials immediately." The associate hesitated, glancing toward the screens that had begun to display real-time confirmation of her authority, yet he moved as instructed, fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. Cassandra's attention was on the reactions in the room, the subtle shifts in posture, the exchanged glances, the quick intake of breath from junior analysts as they realized the scale of what was unfolding. From the corner, a young trader raised her phone discreetly, capturing fragments of the interaction, her eyes wide with disbelief, and Cassandra's gaze met hers for a moment, calm, acknowledging the witness without breaking her composed demeanor. Around her, other staff members were caught between routine procedure and growing doubt, whispers turning into murmurs that spread like a wave through the floor. Richard's impatience grew, and he stepped forward, raising his voice. "This is a serious breach. Step aside before I escalate to compliance." Cassandra tilted her head slightly, measuring the room, her presence a quiet anchor that seemed to slow the passage of time even as chaos edged closer. She recalled her early days in finance, the countless boardrooms where her ideas had been questioned not on merit but on assumption, and she drew strength from those memories, each experience a stone in the foundation of her resolve. The verification protocol she had initiated flickered across the monitors, confirming ownership, access, and credentials with clear, unassailable data. Richard paused mid-command, noticing the screens updating, realizing for the first time that the woman he had underestimated was not only legitimate, but held authority far beyond his perception. The energy in the room shifted imperceptibly at first, then unmistakably. Confidence began to ripple outward from Cassandra, turning skepticism into cautious acknowledgment. Clients observing from the mezzanine leaned in, whispering to one another, the tension now a tangible current in the air as they collectively sensed that a reckoning was imminent. Cassandra's voice finally broke the silence, calm, precise, resonating with authority. All protocols are verified. My authority is confirmed. The statement, simple yet charged, caused a ripple of recognition and uncertainty among the staff. Whispers became hushed conversations, the initial aggression of accusations faltering under the weight of indisputable evidence. And in that moment, every eye in the room, from analysts to senior associates, understood that the day had shifted, that the balance of power had tilted, and that the next few minutes would reveal just how far Cassandra Reed's command extended, leaving the floor suspended in anticipation for the action yet to unfold. Cassandra Reed rose slowly from her chair, every movement deliberate, the room holding its breath as Richard Langford and several associates stared, caught between defiance and disbelief. The monitors displayed each verification, each protocol, confirming her authority beyond question, and yet the tension did not dissipate. It thickened, electric, as staff members glanced at one another, uncertain how to respond. The junior analyst who had been recording lowered her phone slightly, eyes fixed on Cassandra, realizing that she was witnessing something that transcended ordinary procedure. Cassandra's gaze swept across the room, lingering on clients who had come to observe routine transactions, now witnesses to a quiet assertion of power. She recalled her early days when she had first entered finance, the countless moments when competence had been overshadowed by prejudice, and a measured smile touched her lips, a silent acknowledgment that this moment was both familiar and triumphant. Richard attempted to reassert control, raising his voice to command the floor, but the calm in Cassandra's presence acted like a counterweight, each word he spoke seeming smaller, less potent. She activated a second layer of internal verification, live feeds confirming account histories, ownership documentation, and authority signatures, each confirmation appearing in real time, visible to everyone in the room. Murmurs began to ripple outward as the staff processed the reality that the woman they had doubted held undeniable authority. Analysts exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, some still hesitant, but all aware that the hierarchy they had relied upon was shifting beneath them. Cassandra stepped closer to the central console, her posture confident yet unassuming, a masterful blend of composure and latent power, and when she spoke, her voice was steady, resonant, and measured. All credentials are verified. Every protocol executed. My authority is confirmed. The room went silent, the gravity of her words sinking in, each employee understanding that prior assumptions had been shattered and that the moment demanded recognition of truth. Richard's face tightened, a faint flush creeping up his neck, as he realized that any further challenge would not only be futile but recorded, observed, and undeniable. Clients shifted in their seats, leaning closer, intrigued, some whispering quietly to one another, their eyes wide as they watched the calculated, controlled response unfold before them. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of awe, tension, and anticipation, as every action from Cassandra now carried weight. Every glance communicated intent, and the staff collectively sensed that the next moves would not simply resolve a dispute, but set a precedent, establishing authority, respect, and power in a manner that would resonate far beyond the floor of that investment firm. Each second stretched, the quiet hum of computers and faint shuffle of papers accentuating the stillness that hung in the air, every observer caught in the gravity of what was about to happen next, and the anticipation of the inevitable reckoning made the room feel suspended, waiting for the first definitive assertion of authority to ripple through and transform every corner of the floor. Cassandra Reed remained at the center of the floor, her posture relaxed yet commanding, the quiet hum of the office computers underscoring the tension that had taken hold. Every employee and client present was aware that this was no ordinary interaction, that the space itself had shifted to accommodate a display of undeniable authority. Richard Langford moved again, attempting to issue instructions to the staff, but the air around Cassandra seemed to create a subtle barrier, his words losing weight as they reached her ears. She did not respond immediately, allowing the silence to stretch, a calculated pause that magnified her presence and forced the room to adjust to the reality of her authority. Analysts and associates exchanged glances, some biting their lips, others subtly nodding to one another as if to acknowledge a truth that had been long ignored. Cassandra reached for the tablet once more, scrolling through the verification logs and protocol confirmations that had been activated, each detail visible to anyone who dared look. Undeniable evidence of her position. The young analyst who had been recording earlier raised her phone slightly, capturing the scene with wide eyes, her body tense with the realization that she was witnessing a shift in power that would be discussed long after the day ended. Clients leaned closer to the glass partitions, murmuring quietly to each other, the atmosphere charged with anticipation, disbelief, and a sense of watching history in the making. Cassandra's gaze met Richard's again, steady, unflinching, communicating that she was aware of his attempts to regain control and that they were futile. She allowed herself a brief mental return to the early days of her career, to the countless boardrooms and offices where she had faced skepticism based on assumptions rather than merit, drawing strength from each memory, each lesson learned, each small victory that had led her to this moment. As her fingers hovered over the tablet, activating additional verification layers, the room seemed to lean in collectively, sensing the quiet authority that now defined the space. Every whisper, every shuffle, every nervous glance from staff carried a weight that had been absent before, a recognition that the narrative they had assumed was true had been challenged by undeniable fact. Cassandra finally spoke, voice even and measured, cutting through the low murmur. All systems are verified, all authority confirmed. Proceed accordingly. The clarity of her statement caused a perceptible shift. Richard paused mid-step, associates stopped mid-action, and the clients present collectively understood that the floor had tilted, that the authority they had underestimated was real, and that the next minutes would reveal not only how the staff would respond, but also how quickly the balance of power had irrevocably shifted, leaving everyone in the room both tense and captivated by the quiet but unassailable presence of Cassandra Reed. Cassandra Reed remained seated, letting the hum of the office computers and the faint shuffle of papers fill the room, her eyes scanning the reactions of the staff and clients alike. Richard Langford was visibly unsettled, his attempts at asserting authority now faltering under the weight of the verification systems Cassandra had activated. Each monitor displayed detailed confirmations of her credentials, her access rights, and real-time logs of her prior decisions, undeniable proof that challenged every assumption in the room. A few junior analysts whispered among themselves, their voices low, as they realized the scale of authority present in Cassandra's calm demeanor. She allowed the quiet to stretch, letting the tension build and giving space for every observer to process the reality of the situation. Clients leaned in closer to the glass partitions, some raising their eyebrows in surprise, others exchanging subtle nods, sensing the shift of power and the unfolding lesson in composure and authority. Cassandra's mind briefly traced back to her early days in finance, recalling countless moments when her competence had been overlooked, opportunities denied, and judgments made based on appearances rather than merit. Those memories, sharp and instructive, strengthened her resolve as she observed the room now, fully aware of the disparity between perception and reality. Her hand hovered over the tablet, initiating a series of confirmations that would ensure no further doubt remained about her role, her authority, and her control over the operations of the firm. Richard attempted another command, a call to an associate to enforce protocol, but the subtle shift in the office energy rendered his voice less commanding, less effective. Cassandra's presence alone reoriented the room. Employees who had initially questioned her now glanced at one another, understanding that the previous assumptions were flawed and that the authority in front of them was real and active. The young analyst who had been recording moments before lowered her phone, eyes wide, fully aware she was witnessing a masterclass in composed, strategic command. The murmurs of disbelief, mixed with cautious acknowledgment, spread like a wave across the floor, and Cassandra allowed herself a brief, measured breath, maintaining a quiet smile as she sensed the balance of power solidifying in her favor. Her gaze met Richard's once more, unflinching, measured, conveying that the moment of reckoning was imminent and that every movement in the office, every reaction, and every thought of the staff would soon align with the undeniable truth of her authority. The clients, the staff, and the junior observers understood collectively that the ordinary flow of operations had been transformed, that the rules had shifted, and that Cassandra Reed's control was absolute, setting the stage for the next decisive actions that would leave the office not just corrected, but profoundly aware of the force of calm, verified, and unassailable authority. Cassandra Reed shifted her weight slightly, standing tall as the office floor collectively absorbed the undeniable verification of her authority, every monitor displaying the live confirmation of her credentials, access rights, and historical decisions that validated her leadership. Richard Langford, who had been commanding the room moments before, paused mid-gesture, his posture tightening as the reality of Cassandra's verified power began to sink in. The junior analysts, once hesitant and uncertain, now exchanged quick, impressed glances, their whispered conversations laden with acknowledgment that they were witnessing a display of measured control and strategic composure. Clients observing from the surrounding glass partitions leaned in, some with furrowed brows, others nodding subtly, all taking in the shift in the energy of the floor, recognizing that the tension and skepticism that had dominated the room moments ago were now being replaced with recognition and awe. Cassandra's presence seemed to radiate outward, a quiet but undeniable authority that reshaped the environment without a word, every action calculated, every pause purposeful. She recalled her earliest days navigating the finance world, times when her intelligence and initiative had been questioned, underestimated, or dismissed due to appearances rather than merit, and she drew strength from those experiences, knowing they had prepared her for moments like this. Her hand hovered briefly over the tablet, triggering a secondary verification protocol, a precise and deliberate sequence of checks that ensured no doubt remained about her role or her control over the firm. Richard attempted another command, a subtle hand gesture toward an associate, but the room itself seemed to resist his authority, the employees pausing mid-motion, their attention drawn fully to Cassandra, their understanding that the balance of power had shifted clearly evident. The young analyst recording earlier adjusted her phone slightly, capturing the subtle yet powerful dynamics unfolding, the realization that she was witnessing an extraordinary demonstration of quiet dominance reflected in her wide eyes. A soft hum of recognition moved through the room as staff members began to process the evidence, acknowledging that the assumptions they had relied upon were flawed, and that the authority standing before them was not only legitimate but absolute. Cassandra's gaze swept across the room once more, briefly meeting the eyes of Richard, calm and measured, conveying a quiet but unmistakable message that the moment of reckoning was imminent, that her control was comprehensive, and that every observer, from client to staff member, would soon fully comprehend the extent of her command and the inevitable consequences of challenging it. The room, suspended in a tense stillness, felt the shift in energy and anticipation, every whisper, every movement, every thought aligning toward the understanding that the events unfolding were not just procedural but transformative, a powerful reminder that true authority does not need to shout to be recognized, and that every individual present was now a witness to a demonstration of strategic, undeniable, and verified leadership. Cassandra Reed took a slow, deliberate step toward the center of the office floor, her eyes sweeping across each desk, each terminal, absorbing every expression of doubt, curiosity, and disbelief. The verification systems she had activated continued to confirm her authority in real time, glowing across monitors and tablets in the room, a silent affirmation that left no room for challenge. Richard Langford, attempting to regain composure, motioned for an associate to retrieve additional documentation, but the staff hesitated, caught between protocol and the undeniable reality of Cassandra's verified command. The murmurs among analysts grew louder, yet cautious, as the realization set in that the authority they had underestimated was not only legitimate but absolute. Cassandra's gaze met that of a mid-level associate who had been nervously fidgeting moments before, a subtle nod acknowledging their awareness without requiring words, her presence alone grounding the tension. Clients at the glass partitions leaned forward, whispering quietly, their reactions a mix of awe and anticipation, sensing the careful orchestration of power and composure that defined Cassandra's actions. She recalled the countless instances from her early career when assumptions had outweighed evidence, when merit had been dismissed, and she allowed those memories to anchor her resolve, a reminder of the resilience that had carried her to this moment. Her hand hovered above the tablet, fingers poised to initiate additional verification layers, ensuring that no aspect of her authority could be questioned. Richard attempted to speak again, issuing a sharp instruction to enforce compliance, but the room collectively held, the staff waiting for any sign that his words would alter the confirmed reality. Cassandra's presence radiated authority, subtle yet undeniable, commanding attention without raising her voice, each observer sensing the shift in energy and hierarchy, understanding that the previous assumptions had been fundamentally flawed. The young analyst who had been recording adjusted her position, capturing the subtle interplay of control and response, realizing that what she witnessed was a masterclass in strategic authority, measured but complete. Murmurs of acknowledgment spread, low and cautious, as staff members slowly aligned their perception with the facts displayed before them, recognizing the gravity of Cassandra's command. Clients leaned closer, some raising their eyebrows, some exchanging quiet acknowledgments, all attuned to the silent assertion of leadership. Cassandra's eyes returned to Richard, unflinching and measured, conveying a quiet message that the floor had shifted irrevocably, that the room now operated under her oversight, and that every next move would unfold under her calculated, undeniable control. The office, suspended in a quiet tension, felt the weight of her presence, each breath, each glance, each subtle shift reinforcing the clear understanding that Cassandra Reed's authority was complete, that the events of the day had irrevocably changed the balance of power, and that everyone present would carry the memory of this precise, composed, and strategic assertion of leadership long after the moment passed. Cassandra Reed remained in the center of the investment floor, her presence steady and commanding, the soft glow of monitors reflecting off the polished desks around her. The room was filled with a mixture of silence and hushed whispers as staff and clients alike absorbed the unfolding situation, each person aware that this was far from routine. Richard Langford shifted uneasily, attempting to reclaim control with subtle gestures, but the staff hesitated, caught between prior instructions and the undeniable evidence displayed across the screens. Cassandra's gaze swept the room slowly, registering every raised eyebrow, every subtle exchange of glances, each expression feeding her understanding of the room's shifting energy. She reflected briefly on her early experiences in finance, moments when her competence had been questioned or dismissed, drawing strength from those memories as she stood poised and unshakable. Her fingers hovered over the tablet, activating a secondary set of verification protocols that illuminated every relevant record in real time, confirming her authority without the need for argument or confrontation. Analysts who had been uncertain moments before now exchanged discreet nods, their quiet acknowledgment reflecting a growing recognition of her legitimate power. Clients leaning against the glass partitions murmured among themselves, their attention fixed on Cassandra as the realization grew that they were witnessing a carefully orchestrated assertion of leadership. Richard attempted to speak again, his voice firm but faltering, directing an associate to double-check account permissions, yet his words seemed diminished in the presence of verified authority. Cassandra's calm presence radiated outward, every gesture controlled and precise, commanding the room without raising her voice. The junior analyst who had been recording lifted her phone slightly, capturing the unfolding dynamics, understanding that the scene represented more than a procedural verification, but a demonstration of strategic command and composure. Soft murmurs spread across the floor, voices low with acknowledgment, as staff processed the layers of authority and verified credentials, recognizing that the hierarchy they had relied upon had shifted irrevocably. Cassandra allowed a measured pause, her eyes meeting Richard's once more, conveying silently that the moment of reckoning was imminent and that any further resistance would be both futile and observed by every witness in the room. Clients shifted in their seats, some leaning closer, others whispering quietly, sensing the magnitude of her quiet assertion of control. The office was suspended in a delicate tension, each breath, each subtle movement, each glance underscoring the shift in power that had occurred, every observer aware that the remaining moments would fully reveal the depth of Cassandra Reed's strategic, calm, and undeniable authority, leaving an impression that would resonate far beyond the immediate space of the investment floor. Cassandra Reed moved deliberately to the central console, the hum of computers and quiet murmurs of staff creating a charged atmosphere that seemed to vibrate through the polished floors. Every eye in the room was on her, some wide with disbelief, others with tentative acknowledgment, as the verification systems continued to display her authority and credentials in real time. Richard Langford, still attempting to assert control, raised a hand to issue a directive, but the room collectively hesitated, the staff caught between prior instructions and the undeniable confirmation of Cassandra's power. She allowed the tension to stretch, her calm presence amplifying the uncertainty in the room, each pause measured, each gaze intentional. Analysts whispered quietly among themselves, exchanging glances that conveyed astonishment and respect, realizing that they were witnessing an example of controlled, strategic authority rarely seen in such a high-pressure environment. Clients at the outer glass partitions leaned forward, murmuring under their breath, sensing the shift in hierarchy and the careful orchestration unfolding before them. Cassandra's mind revisited moments from her early career when her judgment had been questioned and her ability underestimated, and she drew strength from those experiences, allowing the lessons learned to guide her current actions with precision. Her fingers hovered over the tablet, activating additional confirmation protocols that illuminated detailed histories of ownership, access rights, and prior strategic decisions, each item visible to staff and clients, indisputable and complete. The junior analyst who had been recording adjusted her phone, her eyes reflecting the realization that she was documenting a masterclass in composed and measured leadership. Soft murmurs moved through the room as staff began to absorb the undeniable authority being exercised, their movements slowing, their posture adjusting in recognition of the power present. Cassandra's gaze met Richard's directly, unflinching and controlled, conveying silently that the balance of power had shifted, that any further attempts at confrontation would be ineffectual and observed. Clients exchanged quiet observations, some nodding subtly, others whispering to their colleagues, all fully aware that the room had transformed from routine activity into a demonstration of absolute, strategic authority. Cassandra allowed herself a measured breath, her presence unshakable, a quiet anchor amidst the rising anticipation, every observer aware that the office dynamics had irrevocably changed. The air in the room held a delicate tension, every sound, every movement, every glance magnified in significance as the floor prepared for the next decisive actions that would solidify her command and leave a lasting impression of calm, verified, and undeniable leadership, ensuring that every witness understood the full extent of her influence and the consequences of underestimating her. Cassandra Reed lifted her gaze slowly, the weight of the office now entirely anchored by her presence, each monitor flickering softly to confirm the ongoing verifications that left no room for dispute. The room was alive with subtle shifts in posture, the staff caught between previous directives and the undeniable reality that she held the ultimate authority, her calm focus transforming tension into a collective acknowledgment of her leadership. Richard Langford took a hesitant step forward, his voice attempting control, yet each word seemed to diminish under the quiet assertion of Cassandra's composure, as the junior analysts exchanged glances of understanding, their whispered confirmations spreading through the floor. Clients leaning against the glass partitions observed closely, their eyes reflecting curiosity and admiration, realizing that this was not simply a routine correction but a display of strategic, precise authority. Cassandra's hand hovered above the tablet, triggering a final verification sequence, every confirmation appearing live on the screens for all to witness, reinforcing her role and the power she commanded over the firm. She allowed a brief pause, the silence accentuating her control, letting the room absorb the certainty of her legitimacy, and the subtle hum of electronics punctuated the tension, making each breath, each movement, each glance significant. Memories of her early career flashed briefly in her mind. The meetings where assumptions had overruled merit, the boardrooms where her competence was questioned, and the quiet resilience that had brought her to this point. Those moments informed the precision of her actions now, the calculated calm that left no room for doubt. Analysts adjusted their seating, their hands hovering over keyboards, aware that the verified authority before them rendered hesitation irrelevant. Richard's attempts at regaining command faltered further as Cassandra's presence subtly reorganized the room's energy. Every employee now aware that challenge was not only unnecessary but futile. The young analyst recording earlier moved subtly, capturing the nuances of control, the composure that defined Cassandra, and the quiet ripple effect it created across the floor. Conversations among staff grew quieter, replaced by an almost reverent acknowledgment of power executed with clarity and without spectacle. Clients exchanged hushed comments, their attention fixed on the unfolding assertion of leadership that seemed to stretch beyond the room itself. Cassandra's eyes scanned the room deliberately, resting briefly on each person, measuring reactions, and solidifying her presence as both observer and command center. The office seemed to pulse with the understanding that the previous hierarchy had been redefined, every action henceforth under the influence of verified, undeniable authority. The subtle tension in the air held a new weight as the room prepared for the next decisive moves, aware that Cassandra Reed's strategic and calm command would dictate the immediate future, leaving every witness acutely conscious of the power, precision, and control that defined her leadership in a way that would resonate long after this moment. Cassandra Reed took a measured step forward, her gaze sweeping the room as the soft glow of monitors highlighted every subtle shift in posture and expression among the staff. Richard Langford remained near his desk, his attempts to assert control faltering under the undeniable evidence displayed across every screen, and the whispers of the junior analysts grew more pronounced as they exchanged knowing glances, their understanding of the situation deepening with each passing second. The clients observing from the glass partitions leaned closer, their attention captured by the unfolding demonstration of calm, strategic authority, noting the precision in Cassandra's movements and the quiet confidence radiating from her. Cassandra's mind flickered briefly to her earliest experiences in the industry, moments when competence had been overshadowed by assumptions, when her potential had been questioned not on merit but on appearance, and she drew strength from those memories as she prepared to guide the room toward clarity. Her fingers hovered over the tablet, initiating a sequence of final verification protocols that confirmed ownership, access rights, and prior decisions in real time, visible to everyone present, leaving no room for doubt. Richard attempted to speak, but his voice carried less force as the room collectively recognized the authority she wielded, employees hesitating mid-action as the reality of her control settled over them. Analysts whispered quietly, some nodding subtly, others simply absorbing the scene, their murmurs acknowledging that the hierarchy they had assumed was no longer intact. Cassandra's eyes met those of Richard again, calm, unflinching, conveying that the balance of power had shifted and that any further resistance would be inconsequential. The young analyst recording the event raised her phone slightly, capturing the details of the moment, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief as she realized the magnitude of what was occurring. The energy in the office shifted, subtle yet undeniable, as staff members began to realign their attention and actions with the confirmed authority in front of them. Clients whispered among themselves, leaning forward, their eyes reflecting curiosity and recognition, understanding that this was not merely a procedural interaction, but a carefully orchestrated demonstration of leadership and strategic control. Cassandra allowed a brief pause, letting the weight of the room settle, the silence emphasizing her influence and the clarity of her command. Every breath, every subtle movement, Every glance carried significance as the office prepared for the next series of actions, acutely aware that Cassandra Reed's authority was absolute, verified, and capable of reshaping the dynamics of the firm in a single, deliberate series of moments, leaving a lasting impression on every individual present and setting the stage for the culmination of this strategic and controlled assertion of power. Cassandra Reed straightened her posture, letting the room settle into a tense stillness as every monitor displayed the final confirmations of her authority, each protocol executed perfectly and visibly verified to all present. Richard Langford's attempts at asserting control had diminished entirely, his hands frozen mid-gesture as he realized the scale of her command. The junior analysts exchanging glances, their whispers subdued by the undeniable reality that the hierarchy had shifted irreversibly. Cassandra's gaze swept across the floor, noting the subtle changes in posture, the quiet acknowledgments, the tentative nods from associates who now recognized the precision and composure in her every movement. Clients leaned closer to the glass partitions, their expressions, a mixture of awe and quiet admiration, realizing that they were witnessing a masterclass in leadership executed with calm and strategic clarity. Cassandra recalled her earliest experiences in finance, the countless moments when her insights had been overlooked, her competence doubted, and her presence questioned, drawing from those memories the measured calm that now defined her actions. Her fingers hovered over the tablet briefly, initiating a final series of confirmations, reinforcing ownership, authority, and control in a manner that left no room for argument or challenge. Analysts and associates who had been hesitant moments before now adjusted their attention, aligning with the verified authority in front of them, their subtle nods and quiet movements reflecting acknowledgment of her command. Richard, though still present, realized that any attempt to reclaim influence would be ineffective, and his attempts at vocal intervention faltered under the weight of the live verifications displayed on the screens. The junior analyst recording earlier held the phone steady, capturing the precise, calculated execution of power, understanding that this moment exemplified strategic leadership and composure under scrutiny. Soft murmurs circulated through the staff, their tone shifting from uncertainty to recognition, as each person processed the undeniable evidence of Cassandra's authority. Clients exchanged quiet comments, leaning subtly toward one another, noting the transformation of the office floor from a place of routine operation to a space defined by clarity, command, and controlled influence. Cassandra allowed a measured pause, her eyes meeting Richard's once more, silently communicating that the room now operated under her oversight, that the prior assumptions had been corrected, and that every subsequent action would proceed under her verified authority. The office seemed suspended in anticipation, every sound, every glance, every movement magnified by the weight of her presence, and the entire space responded to the quiet, deliberate assertion of control, leaving all present acutely aware that the balance of power had shifted decisively, that her strategic and calm execution of authority had redefined the hierarchy, and that every witness now understood the full scope and precision of Cassandra Reed's leadership. Cassandra Reed stood silently at the center of the investment floor, the final confirmations of her authority glowing across every monitor, each protocol executed flawlessly, visible to staff and clients alike, leaving no question of her control. Richard Langford's attempts to regain composure faltered completely, his gestures small and ineffective as the room collectively recognized the undeniable shift in power. Analysts and associates exchanged discreet nods, whispers quieted into thoughtful murmurs, their expressions reflecting acknowledgment and respect for the calculated, measured leadership Cassandra had demonstrated. Clients leaned forward from the glass partitions, captivated by the precision of her movements and the clarity of her authority, realizing they were witnessing a masterclass in composed, strategic command. Cassandra's eyes swept across the room, noting every subtle reaction, every adjustment in posture, every small acknowledgment that spoke to the newly established hierarchy and the room's understanding of her role. Memories from her early career, when competence had been underestimated and assumptions had dominated, filled her mind briefly, reinforcing the calm and assured action she now exhibited. Her hand hovered over the tablet once more, activating the last layer of verification protocols, confirming not only ownership and access rights, but also past strategic decisions, each displayed in real time to all present, an indisputable testament to her leadership. The young analyst who had been recording earlier steadied her phone, capturing the final moments as Cassandra's authority crystallized the room's energy, turning uncertainty into acknowledgment and hesitation into alignment. Soft murmurs passed among staff, recognizing the transformation from doubt to recognition, as the hierarchy and flow of the office adjusted around the verified command in front of them. Richard, standing rigid and constrained, met Cassandra's gaze once more, understanding silently that further attempts to assert control were unnecessary and impossible, the office floor now operating under her oversight. Clients continued to observe, whispering quietly, leaning in to follow every movement, every calm decision, understanding that what they were witnessing was not a fleeting moment, but a demonstration of sustained, strategic authority executed without spectacle or theatrics. Cassandra allowed a measured pause, her posture and gaze reinforcing the clarity of her command, the room now attuned to the quiet but absolute influence she wielded. Every breath, every slight movement, every glance carried significance as the staff and clients absorbed the reality of her verified control. The tension in the air, once heavy with uncertainty and doubt, shifted into a collective acknowledgment of power and precision, and the office floor now resonated with the understanding that Cassandra Reed's leadership was complete, deliberate, and undeniable, leaving a lasting impression of authority, composure, and strategic command that would define the firm's operations long after the final verification had been executed.